Hey everyone, like he said, my name is Nick. I'm one of the founders of Tellor. So real quick, Tellor is an oracle, obviously on Gnosis chain, but we're also on Ethereum, Polygon, all the rollups, all the EVM chains. We do price feeds, cross-chain messaging. And today I'm going to talk about kind of the future of what we're building with Tellor and kind of why we're doing that, and hopefully it's an interesting kind of talk for you guys. So before I talk about the future of oracles, let's talk about kind of what I see as like the future of the future. The first thing, this probably won't come as a surprise for any of you guys, but trustless bridges are here. So you guys have funded Succinct, Nil Foundation. The idea is basically you have a light client bridge. So like a light client bridge is where you actually validate the chain's other state. So if you have like a Tendermint chain where you have 100 validators, you need 2/3 of them to sign off on the next block. So what you would do is, one way of doing this is you could have the validator set of, in storage on one chain, and you pass over 67 signatures and just loop through them and validate that they signed off on the next block, and that's kind of what a light client bridge is. You're validating that they all signed off on it, and that's their consensus mechanism. Obviously, it looks different for Ethereum's consensus mechanism or for any other chains, but basically people are building these light client bridges, and they're going to be here. They're already here. Over the next few years, you're not going to have these multi-sig bridges passing stuff back and forth. And what that leads to is the next point, which is it kind of leads to, okay, so if bridging is solved, now we can all go build app chains. We don't have to sit on very, very expensive chains like Ethereum. It should be relatively easy to move across. And that's kind of what the vision that I see. A lot of other people kind of see it too, whether there's thousands and thousands of rollups or thousands and thousands of L1s like Gnosis chain. That almost doesn't matter because the way Tellor currently works as an oracle, you stake our token, and then you're allowed to report data. So you stake TRB token on Gnosis chain. Somebody says, hey, I'll pay you $1 if you put on the price of Bitcoin. All of those reporters race to report the price of Bitcoin for you, and it's optimistic. You can dispute it. The problem with 1,000 chains, though, is that now you need your token on 1,000 different chains, and you're reporting the same Bitcoin price to 1,000 different chains separately. It doesn't really scale really well. So that's why kind of what we'll be talking about. We're actually moving to our own chain. So we're going to be our own chain, and then we'll just bridge the data in a trustless fashion, which is what we're allowed to do. And I don't think there's going to be any one chain that wins this out. So, Gnosis is obviously an EVM chain, but some people are talking about whether it's a Cosmos chain or something like that. There's going to be a whole bunch of different chain structures that sort of pop up. If you recently saw DYDX and Celestia recently launched, both of them are Cosmos chains, but they couldn't be like any more different. They have like vastly different block times. They have, DYDX is doing things where they have like Oracle logic built into the validators to where, you could say like, oh, well, Oracle updates have to happen before the trades happen. And you can do, Celestia is very optimized for being a data availability layer. So the chains, if you're a dev shop out there, I think like the next big dev shop opportunity is like, just go take people's smart contracts and go make them into their own app chain. Like I think that's going to be the big thing that people are doing. And then kind of the last prediction, this is, if you don't know how, our biggest problem as an oracle is people want very, very fast and very, very secure. So, they're like, listen, we need the price of Bitcoin updated every half second, and it's going to have to, you're going to have to be able to handle $200 million of TVL, and you're like, oh man, like cost aside, like let's just, but you want to try and satisfy this, so how can you do that as an oracle? Okay, so just kind of piggybacking on this last security piece, as you think about a world of app chains, what you should really think about is like, okay, well, what is a sovereign app chain versus, are these actually going to be sovereign chains, or are they not going to be sovereign chains? How do you actually handle that, and how do you handle security on them? So if you think about Gnosis chain, if you have like $150 million staked of GNO, then does that mean that you could 51% attack Gnosis chain with $75 million? Technically, you could maybe say, but like no, like it doesn't work that way. Like Gnosis chain you could easily put, $100 million or way more on Gnosis chain, and nobody's going to be 51% attacking Gnosis chain. Like it's decentralized enough, and the cost of acquiring that amount of money, and also the time it would take to do that. Like if you actually did attack Gnosis chain, Gnosis is actually a sovereign chain, you could fork and remove that. So like if somebody came on and bought up $75 million worth of GNO and then decided to double spend with it, you guys wouldn't all just sit, we wouldn't all just sit there and be like, oh, well, I guess they broke our chain. We would say like, no, that actually didn't happen. Like, nice try, sir. Thank you for, pumping our price in the time. And that's what, like having this ability to fork it's huge. This is actually where most of the security in blockchain kind of comes from. It's the idea of the social layer. Like Bitcoin, if you didn't know, Bitcoin, you can break Bitcoin's proof of work for about $1 million an hour if you have the hardware. The electricity costs are not that high. So then you would question, like, why don't people go break Bitcoin's proof of work? And it's like, well, the chain's just going to revert. Like, they're not going to accept it. Exchanges make you wait an hour. So it's not going to happen. And so this is kind of why we chose to be an L1. You can have security that's actually greater than your market cap if you have this ability to fork, if you have this sort of sovereign layer over top. And that's something that we're really interested in. And then also just as we talk about bridging, making sure that we wait for checking for forks and things like that to maintain that. Okay, so now on to what do actual oracles look like. So it's not just going to be middleware. So oracles right now, if you guys out there are building projects that need an oracle, you probably just need a price feed. Most of them, that's still the big piece that people are asking for. Can I get the price of Bitcoin? Or can I get the price of my own app, my own altcoin on this chain? Usually the conversation goes like this: listen, are you on this chain? Can you support this price? And you'll probably have one, maybe two options as far as an oracle goes. There's just not that many out there. And then your choice is like, okay, well, one of them is probably like Tellor, which is decentralized. It might be a little bit more, might be slower, or there's this centralized one that we can use that, should work, but it's centralized. And that's kind of the basis decision. But middleware should be solved. So, the idea, some people are working on like these ZK APIs, to where you can already call an API. And the idea of just being able to read off-chain data or putting price feeds on, once you have these trustless bridges, that's not going to be necessarily an issue. Oracles are going to have to become something more. You're going to have to actually have a value add on top. So, like if somebody wants the ETH US dollar price as a settlement price for their DeFi application, you're going to have to actually add something on top of that, namely, what is an ETH US dollar price? How do you secure that? How do you make sure that there's the volume there to actually, secure whatever application you're doing? And those are more of the requests that we're seeing. And I'll kind of get into this in a minute. So like price feeds. So this is something that we're working really hard on, is how can we give the best price feeds for people in a secure fashion. So we're starting to couple a lot of our price feed data with sort of, you can call them caveats, but it's like additional data on top. So one of the things that we get, so everyone's creating a new stablecoin these days, and most of the new stablecoins are going to be backed with staked ETH or liquid staking tokens for whatever chain. The problem with this, though, is that most of these liquid staking tokens trade on one DEX. So you want a price feed for your stablecoin for the underlying collateral, and it trades on one DEX. This is obviously, like, if you don't want to use a DEX price as the underlying for the oracle, because people can throw the DEX price. They can manipulate this. So what we have to do is we have to say, listen, if you use Tellor, like, we can update it. So hopefully you can go get a centralized exchange listing. You can get other DEXs to support it. We can aggregate them, but we can also give you liquidity numbers on top. We can give you, okay, if this DEX only has $10 million worth of volume in there, you're going to probably want to put a TWAP over top of it for the price to make sure that it's not going to be manipulated. Or if the price starts moving wildly, you're going to want us to add in some outlier protection. And using oracles in this manner is something that people are going to have to do, because I think people are going to start seeing these attacks. We've already seen some of these attacks where, like in the past, it was just like, oh, can I flash loan it in one block and then move the price? But if your asset only trades on one exchange, people can just manipulate the price and then do attacks on the underlying. Like if arbitrage bots aren't, say, ready to sort of act, people are going to get wrecked this way. And hopefully, if you're watching this, you can come to us and build kind of a better price feed out of it. Something that actually does check for these things. And then the last thing that oracles kind of the future are going to do is you're going to have to aggregate data. So one of our big projects now is we're working on how can we do inflation data. So most of the time, inflation data, unemployment data, GDP data, these are all calculated by different countries. It's sort of a public good in a lot of ways. Every country out there will have kind of its own methodology for doing this and its own way of funding this. The problem is that it's very hard to aggregate across countries. So inflation data in the US does not mean the same thing as inflation data in Europe or the same thing as inflation data in Australia. Even though, like, if you guys know how inflation is calculated, it's just a survey of prices. Like that's the producer surveys, they just go ask people prices. Like, why can't we do this in a decentralized way? We very much can. And that's something that we're working on doing. Same with GDP numbers. How can you get proxies for these? How can you put it on and actually have real numbers that are useful? Then we can create things such as stable coins that aren't pegged to the dollar. They could be pegged to a basket of goods that are actually global. These are things that actually get us excited. So other things, we have I was talking about forking a lot, kind of in this presentation. One of the hardest questions comes in is, how will a bridge decide a fork? So if Gnosis chain decides to fork and you have a light client bridge over on Ethereum, how do you know which fork on Gnosis chain to follow? You actually don't. You need some way on Ethereum to get that, and that's something that oracles can be really helpful with. We can be monitoring the chains, we can be monitoring the social layers. Obviously, maybe Ethereum's own social layer could decide that. But it's just something that you'll definitely want to build in over top of the network, or else you could be in a situation where you're following the wrong fork, and that would not be good. Anyway, I think that's about it for my presentation.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick.